Well, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Today we continue our webinar series with the topic Cognitive Collaboration, how AI and machine learning are transforming how we work and collaborate. I'm your host, Joe Wachna, and I'd like you to welcome our moderator today, Mr. Derek Stevens. Derek is a product manager for Cisco WebEx. He's spent about 9 years in technology marketing and is based in New York. You can follow Derek on Twitter at Derek in the Cloud and read his latest blogs on webex.com. Our featured guest today, Mr. Keith Griffin. Keith joined Cisco's Collaboration Technology Group in 2007 and is currently the CTO for Intelligence and Analytics. He has over 20 years of experience in the enterprise collaboration industry and is based in Galway, Ireland. Keith is focused on cognitive collaboration technology, including AI and machine learning. This includes metrics, analytics, and data science for collaboration technology. He leads Cisco's collaboration IP, patent, and research strategy, and works closely with customers, partners, and analysts to ensure that technology direction is aligned with the market needs. You can also follow Keith on Twitter at TechKeith. Now, before we begin, just a few housekeeping items to take care of. All audio lines are in listen-only mode. There's one main chat panel. Please use that for any issues, general comments. You'll see that at the bottom of your screen and also pops up on the right column. We will try to make time for Q&A at the end of the webcast. Derek and Keith will attempt to address your questions, time permitting. We'll also be serving up a few poll questions during the webcast, so look for those to pop up in the lower right corner of your screen. Your participation and encouragement is appreciated. Lastly, this webcast is being recorded, and a replay and slide deck will be made available in the coming days. So now, without further ado, here's Derek and Keith with Cognitive Collaboration, how AI and machine learning are transforming how we work and collaborate.
Perfect. Well, thanks for the great intro, Joe, and thank you everyone for being here today. We have a really exciting topic for you on cognitive collaboration. If you haven't heard of cognitive collaboration before, it's all about bringing machine learning as well as artificial intelligence to improve the way we work and how we collaborate. So we'll be diving a lot more into that discussion during this hour. We're lucky enough to have Keith Griffin with us today. Keith was really instrumental in circulating the idea of cognitive collaboration around Cisco a few years ago when he published a white paper. We've actually since made that white paper available publicly. You can find that on webex.com. So feel free to hop over there and give it a read after this session. So Keith, let's get right into it. Even though you're in Ireland and I'm in the U.S., it hasn't been too long since we've seen each other, since we were both out at Enterprise Connect last week. Enterprise Connect is a pretty big show, right, for the collaboration space. So I thought a good place to start might be to ask you, what were your thoughts on the show this year? Any sort of trending topics that you saw, and maybe what struck you as different this year than previous years?
Sure, yeah. Thanks, Derek, and hi, everyone. So Enterprise Connect, it is an interesting show. If you think back to the history, comes from telephony, IP telephony, contact center. So one of the things that was very different is who would have thought back in those days that we'd be talking about artificial intelligence in the enterprise collaboration space. And that's something we started doing and introducing some demos and kind of like teasers towards the way the technology was going a few years ago. But what was really different about this year, I felt, was it was around announcements around technologies that were actually available. And this is kind of proving that the technology set around cognitive collaboration, the underlying techniques like machine learning, to me, they're now becoming proven technology. We can show that these can make a difference. They can solve problems that we really couldn't solve before, or provide us different ways of introducing different user experiences in the collaboration environment. So that to me was really the big takeaway. It's something that's emerging in the industry. It's something which I think helped to drive, I think will be fair to say, in the collaboration industry. And frankly, it's great to see it. It's great to see that type of evolution happen in our space, where these technologies can make a difference and can start delivering experiences both visible and invisible. Some of them are very obvious where AI is used, and others less so, but still make a difference in the to the user.
Yeah, absolutely. And, from my perspective as well, being there, it's interesting to see the different perspectives because at a show like that, you can't attend to everything, right? But it was good to see a lot of talk around AI, a lot of talk around cloud still and how to migrate, which model to choose. And then the third one that I thought was big was around interoperability as well and supporting, for the technology mix that's out there today, integrating into things like Salesforce and the sort of the productivity suites like Microsoft. So it was definitely a great show, and I'm glad we were able to catch up there as well. All right, so before we dive deeper into AI, we would like to take a quick poll. Joe, can you pull that poll up for us? All right, so you should be you should see a poll that's coming through. There are two questions there. One is, do you use a digital assistant at home? So, an Amazon Alexa or a Google Assistant. And would you use a digital assistant at work? So if you won't mind just taking a minute to fill that out. And while we wait for your responses, Keith, let's get right into the next question. A little bit about your background. So how did you get involved in the AI space and machine learning? Were what attracted you to that field? I don't know, were you a big fan of Star Trek or 2001: A Space Odyssey?
I was definitely fans of those. I mean, you're not allowed to be an engineer if you're not. So that's for sure. But it wasn't just that. It is interesting though that a lot of the science fiction from those times are science fact now, and they're just normal everyday things that we can do. At least in some of the features we saw in those in that sort of art. So yeah, for me, it's interesting. I mean, I learned artificial intelligence at university, although the AI and machine learning that we're practicing right now is not that. And that's a very interesting evolution in the AI space. Really, there was a big shift in the way that machine learning could be carried out really within the last 10 years. So I think there's, everything that was before that and then everything that was after that are different spaces. And they're not mutually exclusive. For me, I came into this space really in the, I would say, like -5 years ago in a big way. But before that, and even 10 years before that, I had focused a lot on graph technologies like social graphs and social software and the contextual aspect of collaboration. And that evolved. It's had peaks and troughs, just like AI has. There's been plenty of AI winters where not a lot was happening, and it had a lot more expectations than capability. But certainly that change, that shift we saw around between say 2010 to 2012 timeframe in the industry really started hinting that more results may be possible. And it was enabled by really a number of different things. It was enabled by, first of all, as things often are, money and research. So a lot of really good academic research that was, for the most part, industry funded. But secondly, two elements to this, which were the availability of data from cloud companies, and secondly, the availability of compute, that I could go with a credit card and go to AWS or GCP or any other platform and just access the compute that I might need to experiment with this without needing the sort of hardware that would have been needed before that. So the combination of those three areas, really, the availability of data, availability of compute, and that injection in research really started to make a difference. And it's interesting in that from an algorithmic point of view, there wasn't a lot of necessarily new work in the algorithmic space. A lot of them existed already, but certainly there was a lot of work in access to data and newly available data. Now, it's not entirely true to say no new algorithms emerged. That's not what I mean. But there were it was really a lot more focused on data and compute. So for me, being able to identify that existed and working with the leadership of our group here who were prepared to take a chance on that and actually challenge it and say, well, can it really make a difference? And we just started asking ourselves questions like, well, can this change the user experience? Can we solve problems that we couldn't solve before? And that's a great place to be. And that gave the platform to develop some of these features, and then led me to this area of cognitive collaboration, which makes me lucky to have what I consider to be the best job at Cisco, to play with all of these toys and work on this technology. So that's how it happened.
Yes, that's great. I think it brings us to our next question as well. And Joe, I don't know if you can push the poll results out here, but let's see. Oh, it looks like it's coming through. Yeah, so it's kind of a mix. It looks like a majority of the audience would use a digital assistant at work, and a slight majority is using it today. So, which is interesting as well, right? Because we recently ran a survey with Dimensional Research. We haven't actually published it yet. It'll be out in a few weeks. But one of the takeaways is that people are ready for these kind of experiences at work. And Keith, is that aligned with what you're seeing as well?
Yeah, it is, and I'm looking at the survey results with great interest here because it shows the difference between maybe the enterprise environment and consumer environment. There's quite a spread on the results if you look at the data here, across how people would or would not use assistants, or do not use this on a daily basis in the consumer space or personal space. Yet, from having digital assistants at work, there is a preference for. And the interesting thing about it is that we carried out some surveys on that. And this was like 2 years ago, because we had to obviously validate our strategy and validate that what we were doing technically, where we knew we could get results, was one thing, but would people be prepared to engage with that type of experience in the collaboration space? Are people ready for things like face recognition or virtual assistants that can help get stuff done? If you look at our results in terms of what's on here, it's almost exactly the same as the poll results here in terms of 60 versus 63%, saying that they really would be more productive with virtual assistants and would be prepared to use those. And the greater rationale being that people would have more time for high value tasks. In other words, getting on with the work that we're supposed to be doing, that we're paid to do, as opposed to dealing with maybe the administrative overhead of scheduling, joining, or participating in the meeting. We really feel that a meeting platform should be about enabling the meeting and enabling work to get done, not having to interact with the system and be challenged to either join or interact with the meeting environment itself. And that's what a lot of our WebEx Intelligence focus is about, and a lot of the cognitive collaboration piece is about. So yeah, it's really great to see this on the poll result. We also though found in this survey, which was very, very informative for us in terms of forming our strategy, we also found that people had a strong opinion on data privacy, and while they were prepared to bring this type of technology and functionality to the workplace, they really expected it to work in a way that was data privacy centric, that respected whatever data privacy policies an employer would have, and those vary. There was a different attitude, just like there is in our survey results, towards an enterprise centric assistant and a consumer assistant. And I guess we can come back and talk more about that later, but it was an interesting takeaway from that survey result.
Yeah, I wondered too, thinking back to the early days when, Amazon Alexa first appeared and Siri, as well as, facial recognition capabilities from some of these other companies. I think in the very beginning, there was definitely more of a sort of creepiness factor to it, right? And it looks like the market is maturing a bit here too, right? And people are a bit more accepting of these technologies.
I think so, and the consumer space obviously helps with that, as people are somewhat used to the various different pieces of functionality, whether it's like a consumer assistant or unlocking your phone using your face or a thumbprint. These are things that creep into our everyday lives. So working with that in the enterprise is not surprising, and that kind of led us also to think about where we would apply the technologies. I think that's that is an important aspect of this. It's not just about looking at why or how we could just use technologies like this everywhere, but where do they make sense? You could be tempted to say, well, let's just have like a single assistant that's a single virtual brain for the entire enterprise or for the collaboration system, and I wouldn't I wouldn't miss that. In the future, I wouldn't not miss it. I wouldn't dismiss it. I think it's something that we could get to, but I think it's also a fairly lofty goal. And what we found was we could apply technologies more tactically and more directly for features and to try solve problems that couldn't be solved before, like I mentioned earlier. So that became our approach here, was looking at those survey results and looking at our own experimentation to figure out where we would apply this. So ultimately, we ended up, as you'll see more later, we ended up applying machine learning features in particular to the before, during, and after a collaboration experience. And I say collaboration experience because it could be a meeting, it could be a call, it could be a contact center or customer care journey. And it's important that they're all included in that, and that we really felt we could make a difference by applying these features across the board. That was an important takeaway for us.
Yeah, it's very cool. And it seems like, a lot of this stuff too is sort of moving from that realm of sci-fi that we were talking about into real world applications, right? So it's a cool evolution to see.
Yeah, it is. And on that point, it is also, the evolution it also means doing things in a different way. And machine learning development is extremely different from traditional software development. And it meant, we found we were measuring our feature success with accuracy outcomes as opposed to completeness of a user interface or other measures we would have used in the past, because all of these are data driven. So, that's an interesting call out, and something I'd encourage everybody to go take a look at is the different techniques that are used in supervised learning, in unsupervised learning, reinforcement learning, and the various techniques that are there. And, it's about applying the right technique to solve the problem at hand, not just about, using them for the sake of each one. The implications of each technique are different in terms of the amount of data required, in terms of the interaction with a customer environment, in terms of data privacy. So that's something I just call out to everyone is, if you're not, maybe you already are, if you're not familiar with how machine learning works, go check out some of the tutorials on that. It's a pretty fascinating area.
Yeah, and that's something that maybe we could schedule another webinar for in the future, right? It's an interesting topic. Yeah. So we've talked a little bit here about your background. You touched on Cisco's history in the space a little bit as well. I don't know if you want to go into any more detail there, or we could kind of take a look at what we've introduced in the WebEx platform today, leveraging these capabilities.
Yeah, let's do that. And this really covers what we talked about last week and what we announced at Enterprise Connect largely. So as we were going through that strategy and vision around applying machine learning technology to multiple different areas, what came out of that was our definition for cognitive collaboration, which was broken out into 4 main areas. And 3 of those we focused on initially, and one we introduced just recently with the acquisition of a company which brought in the relationship intelligence piece. So looking across the board here, we focused firstly on multimodal bots and assistants. We focused on computer vision, audio and speech technologies, and then, as I mentioned, relationship intelligence. And they've all got very different applications of machine learning and AI. Obviously, a multimodal bots and assistants means voice and text bots and assistants, and how you interact with those is, say, very different from how you might interact with a face recognition system, or how you might interact with a speech system. In fact, with speech, there's some similarities because obviously you can speak to a virtual assistant. And then on the relationship intelligence part, it was really about bringing more contextual information into the collaboration environment, whether it's a meeting for us initially and then into other forms of collaboration later. But that was the definition we put on this, because you've got to constrain this in some ways, and you've got to break it down into the technology areas that are valuable to customers in the collaboration space. So this is the way we went about it. This may very well likely expand over time, but also we'll go a lot more deeply into each of the areas as we develop the portfolio more.
Yeah, that's great. And it'd be great to spend some time here to get a little bit of a deeper dive into each of these pillars and exactly what we're doing around them. we've talked a lot about digital assistants already, right? We've had our poll up and we've discussed it. But can you tell me and tell us more about, WebEx Assistant and kind of how that differs from a consumer digital assistant like an Amazon Alexa to what could be leveraged in the enterprise?
Sure. Yeah, this is an important consideration, important differentiation as well. We're all familiar with consumer assistants. You can see from the poll there's mixed use of those, but still people are aware of what they can do. And really, what it boils down to is the use cases are very different. In the consumer space, I might choose to do something like play music or add something to my shopping list or set a reminder either for business or not. But there's a big difference between those types of use cases and then what I do at work. It would be nice to play music and have it running in the background here, but I don't think my colleagues would appreciate my choices too much. So instead, the types of use cases that we focus on here are being able to schedule a meeting, being able to join or interact with colleagues. What we've done is really focused on the room and space-based collaboration, as well as calling, as well as device control. And then, of course, where a consumer assistant is pretty much like standalone, but integrated with consumer web services like weather or music or various other things, what we have is an enterprise-grade Cisco device, which is already in use in the conference room for video and the other functionality it does. And we've enabled that with a set of microservices, which are the WebEx Assistant services, and those in turn are then integrated with a lot of the corporate environment, like the directory, calendars, and various other integration points that you'd expect from your collaboration system. What that leads us to then is to have WebEx Assistant as a collaboration assistant where I can do things like shown on the screen. I can ask it to join the meeting. I've got to be careful here because I have my assistant running in the background, and if I keep saying the wake word, I'll wake it up and with sometimes hilarious results. So I will avoid saying the wake word and just refer to it as the wake word. But if I say that and then say join my meeting or call Derek, or record the meeting. That's a good example of an in-meeting type or in-collaboration type experience. And it's also a good example because it's one of those things you want people to hear. If I ask, if I verbalize that and ask during a meeting for WebEx Assistant to record the meeting, I need everyone else to hear that I am asking that and the meeting is being recorded. In some cases, legally in certain states, that has to be the case. So there's certain valuable in-meeting experiences, but there's also the basic ones like joining the meeting. It just solves that problem of joining the meeting on time. Another thing to point out here is that with our announcements last week, we announced a trial of a feature on WebEx Assistant, which is called Proactive Join. So in addition to speaking to the system, it can speak to me. So when I walk into the room, I can proximity pair with my device to the video endpoint that's in the room, and it will realize that it's me and I've got an upcoming meeting and will ask me if I would like to join my meeting now. And I can say no and just get myself ready and join afterwards. Or I can say, yes, please, and it will go and join the meeting right at that time. The reason we're introducing that is during our early field trials, we saw huge adoption and huge engagement with that user experience, which makes sense. I mean, as a person, if somebody or something speaks to you, you generally answer back. And if it sounds like it's going to make a difference and get me there on time, I'm going to say yes. And while I'm doing all of the normal setup that makes me late, like opening my laptop, hanging up my coat, chatting to people in the room and getting ready to share my screen in the meeting, it's looking after that for me. It's starting the meeting so that when I'm in, I can then ask it to share my screen and I'm in on time and ready to go. So that was a feature that we accelerated because of the type of adoption that we saw around that. And then one final area that I would call out on WebEx Assistant is the calling functionality, that every aspect of it is backed by machine learning. So if I say something vague like call Derek, there's several Dereks at Cisco, how would it know that it's you I want to call? And it does that by looking at our interaction distance and organizational distance. We're not that far away from each other in the organization hierarchy, But what would really pick up on is the fact that, you and I work together relatively closely. We were working together in the same location last week. So our interaction distance would be high. That score would be high, and it's going to bring you to the top of the list of all of the Derek's that are at Cisco. So that's something that I think is they're incremental features. They're all using machine learning and weighted type of technologies, but every aspect of the decisions that it makes are based on that type of technology. So rather, the simplest thing would be to just give an alphabetical list or something like that. But we've tried to think these through to make sure that they're suitable for the enterprise, that it helps to solve these types of problems. It's all about these, I think, very, very minor productivity gains that can all add up to really make a big difference. So that's something that I think, is the difference to answer your question around, say, a consumer assistant versus enterprise assistant. It's a combination of the functionality and also how we've gone about the design in the enterprise environment.
Gotcha. Yeah, and I'm sure there's also a security piece to that as well, right? We'll talk about that a little bit later, but I think that's probably another aspect of it too, a differentiator from the consumer to enterprise, right?
Yeah. Let's come back to that one. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So your next pillar was around computer vision. Can you tell us more about what Cisco's doing there?
Yeah, it's a very interesting area. The reason it's interesting, I think, is that it's quite visual, right? It's often those types of features that you can interact with. Sometimes they can easily catch the imagination a bit more than other features. But also it solves a number of very typical problems that we come across in meeting space environments. If you take this environment here, for example, it's shown on the screen, you've got 6 people in a meeting room. All of our meeting rooms here in Galway in Ireland are named after Irish literature figures. So if I go and speak from a conference room, it's going to show up as W.B. Yeats or James Joyce or somebody like that, right? And that's the name of the conference room. That's fine. If there's 3 people in the room and they all speak at different times, then the name of the room shows up each time. So how do you solve that? Also, if I'm meeting with people that maybe I don't know so well, how can I get more information about them, their name or something like that? How do I get that type of name labeling? So the face recognition feature and name labeling feature really solves both of those problems and will solve more. We have many more use cases that we're intending to solve with this technology. It's again in trials has proven to have pretty good adoption and is proving to solve those problems. And like I say, we've got a long way to go as well. We intend to take this to various different features. But what's maybe even more important in this is not just simply getting the name label, but how we go about doing that. And what we're doing is we're leveraging the NVIDIA GPU that we have in our video endpoints. And we're doing effectively like a 2-stage recognition. The first step that you have is opting into the system, because we want people to consciously opt in, and we want people to be aware that they'll be identified in a meeting. This shouldn't be some creepy type of feature. It needs to be something that people consciously opt into. And as part of that opting in step, they provide an image. They take effectively a selfie. They take a picture and provide that to the system. And from there, we calculate an identifier, and that's the first step in the system. And then afterwards, in a real-time live environment, say I'm in a meeting environment like the one shown on the screen, when the camera picks up an image of a face, what it can do is calculate the identifier for that face and match it against a known identifier. So what we're doing is trying to really minimize risk in identity all of the way through the design of the system. And it makes a lot of sense to do that in enterprise environments. I mean, the simplest thing in the world to do would have been, not that it's simple, but would have been simpler to just stream all of this to the cloud and do everything there. But for enterprise-centric environments, it makes, we have to go further in our design thoughts and design principles to look at each step, what can we do to really minimize any risk to PII, personal identifiable information at every step of the process. So that's the approach we've taken here, and what we found is that this helps to drive adoption in enterprise environments because, again, it's not consumer-like in its design approach. It's designed specifically for enterprise.
Yeah, that's perfect, and this is something that seems to be really helpful when when you've got a room like this where there are 5, 6, 7 attendees, and you don't know who's speaking, right? So
yes.
it's really helpful. But audio is still one of the main ways that we communicate and collaborate. So what are we doing around audio and speech technologies?
Yeah, this is an area, I just want to pick one example in this. There's many that we're active in. Obviously, WebEx Assistant, you have to speak to the system. So, there's a speech element to that, a speech engine, both speech to text and text to speech. But the one I wanted to pick on here was, or pick out was noise detection and suppression in meetings. The reason I wanted to do that was this was a breakthrough feature really for, for Cisco, for our teams. It really proved that machine learning could make a difference, and it was developed by a super smart data scientist in our teams who was able to create this breakthrough feature. And we were asking ourselves at that time, can this technology make a difference? Let's find a number of use cases that were difficult to solve in the past, like you could look at the audio waveform and apply digital signal processing or other techniques to try solve this. And that had been tried several times with some kind of limited or partially useful success. And the breakthrough here was being able to do something that machine learning is very good at, pattern matching, by matching known trained noises, background noises that occur in meetings, like dogs barking or keyboard tapping or sirens. And we trained the system on that. And then being able to identify when that happens live in a meeting, in real time, very quickly, and do that in a way that doesn't require some huge compute power to do it. I mean, this is not something that can work as a feature, but takes from your video quality or share quality or something like that. It's almost like instrumentation. It has to be invisible and has to be able to work really well. And like I say, it got those results. This is something that, we did this over 2 years ago, and it's available in the WebEx Meetings desktop clients. It's available in our Room series devices, the video devices, and there's different user experiences. In WebEx, where I'm at the meeting and I've got the client in front of me, it pops the mute button. In a room system where maybe I'm further away back in the room and the camera is and screen is away from me, it may not be so suitable to have somebody have to move to go to the mute button. So instead we suppress the audio there from the noisy source and can ramp it back up when we hear speech again coming from that source or detect speech coming from that source. So I just wanted to call that one out. It's very, it's very, very interesting as a breakthrough feature, and gave us the confidence to go search out other areas to go apply machine learning to. And one thing I'll just point out here as a kind of a fun fact is, just like on face recognition, you need a very, very diverse model, right? So you've got a very diverse global population that we need to do face recognition on. Similarly, we didn't want to leave out like any dog breed, so we have 110 different dog breeds in the trained model that sits behind this, as well as multiple different siren types from all over the world. But it's important that the model is diverse, and that's a good takeaway. Again, back to my point earlier around learning about machine learning. Data bias and algorithmic bias are things that exist in the system, and you've got to have extremely good data scientists that know how to navigate that and try to come up with a very accurate system.
Yeah, that's very cool. So I've got a Mutt at home, so I wonder what she'd register as. I don't have to get one of those DNA kits anymore. Just use your algorithm. So the last pillar that you showed there was relationship intelligence, and this one gets me really excited because I think it could be a game changer for collaboration. Can you tell us more about that one?
Yeah, and in a way of saving the best for last here, I mean, this is our most recent announcement and is really, really an exciting area. This is built on a recent acquisition of a company. That's the company name, so it's difficult sometimes to talk about a company called a company, but that is what the technology is based on. And what it is about is bringing rich dynamic profile information into the meeting so that you can understand more about who you're meeting with, maybe what their company is, what the latest news is, and gives you both talking points in the meeting as well as useful information. So to describe this, it's important to look at two separate areas. First of all, we anchor this on the corporate directory information, which is shown in the center, which typically is there for every collaboration system integration. And then we supplement that with information coming from a company, from the profiles that it gathers from professional sources on the web. So those would be, in my case, the bio comes from my Cisco bio on Cisco Live, and information about my blogs are coming from my collaboration blogs at Cisco, and so on. It's it's not picking up the bike ride I did and posted on Strava. It's looking at exactly the type of information that a meeting attendee or professional colleague would be interested in. It's got education information and background and so on, and then over here on the right hand side, it's got company information. So what we're doing is introducing this as people insights into WebEx meetings. So on the roster, as shown here, I could click on the People Insights icon, and it will basically bring out this panel that's shown on the right-hand side. Now, immediately, and a lot of the reaction that we got last week was, oh, this is phenomenal information, but and it's very, very useful in a meeting environment, but talk to me about control. I mean, as a user, what type of control do I have over this? This is my profile, so tell me it's full control. And the answer to that is yes. The user has edit control over this. The user can decide to hide it entirely. They can decide to edit, different portions of this, or in fact entirely, opt out and have that right to be forgotten or deletion controls that you would expect in a system like this. And again, that's really critical when it comes to enterprise-centric design versus the consumer space. It's it's a really critical information, and I kind of consider this, even already I've been on early trials for this, and I consider this to be almost as breakthrough as video was at the time. And the adoption may be similar. Sometimes it was difficult to get video adoption, but then try to take it away from somebody after they've got it. I think it's going to fall into that same category. This is very, very useful information, and it really helps to make people connect within the meeting and collaboration space. But then what I find is when I go to a system that doesn't have this, I'm seeking it out and looking for it. So I think that's it's just going to follow that same type of adoption trajectory would be my guess. But again, these are all very data-driven features, every single one that I've talked about here. And we will make sure that we are looking at all of the feedback and all of the data to make informed choices about these features and help customers get them adopted and rolled out. But yeah, we're very, very excited about this, and it's received a lot of good buy-in so far.
Yeah, and if we've got time, I know that we've got a couple slides in the appendix that we could probably click through and talk about this in a little more detail, because I do think it is cool and we should spend some time on it. But you did bring up a good point there about control, and so I'd like to switch now and talk a little bit about data privacy. So for WebEx, we uniquely have this platform that combines meetings, teams, devices, calling, and contact center, which we haven't really touched on much yet. But that's a lot of data coming in, which enables us to do a lot of unique use cases with AI and machine learning in the future. But again, in terms of data privacy, with all that data coming in, what steps are we taking here with these new features?
Yeah, it's to me the most important question. It's as important or more than the feature themselves in each area, and the answer is that it's different depending on the feature, on each different part of cognitive collaboration. It's not a case of one size fits all, and we have worked with with several customers and various legal departments around defining data privacy policies for machine learning. That's something that is needed. Changes are needed in terms of how we interact with our data, and that is the case in every customer environment, regardless of whether it's machine learning or not. That's something that everyone, I think, needs to be conscious of and aware of. I think looking at this, it is different in each area. What we've tried to do, especially for these initial set of features, is to make sure that there's really no customer data interaction where possible, because it's important to make these deployable right from the beginning. And what I mean by that is, if you look at something like Webex Assistant, we've effectively sourced the data to teach the assistant ourselves. We're not relying on customer data or integration with the customer environment to teach the system anything. Obviously, you've got to integrate with something like a corporate directory so it knows that a name or a phone number is there to be able to place a call, which is more on the API side, and that already all exists and is all there. But to teach the system what join my meeting means, or what call Derek means, and actually train those types of intents, that conversational AI, that's data we sourced ourselves. The same when it comes to FaceRec. There's two aspects. There's the neural network and model of recognizing a face, and then there's recognizing a specific person. So we've, again, gone out and sourced all of the data to recognize faces in general ourselves. We don't rely on or try and improve our system based on customer data. But obviously there is the opt-in for the customer and the end user to be recognized themselves. But they're then using a pre-trained model that we've been able to put in place based on our own data, our own source data. So it's taking those types of steps that I think have made a difference. And to cover the people insights, if I jump to those slides you were mentioning, it is important that throughout all of this, that people are also in control of that data. So from a face recognition point of view or a Webex Assistant point of view, if I decide to opt out, the administrator can opt the entire organization out. And when they do that, all data, all residual data, including the machine learning models, are removed. The same for FaceRec. When an individual decides, they can go to a settings page and be in control of the image they uploaded. They can choose to delete it. They can choose to hide the name label so it just works the way it always did in the past. Or they can choose to just delete everything and opt out and not be enabled for that. Similarly, if somebody was to leave, if they leave the organization, we will get that directory update that they're no longer there. So it's not just a case of removing a name or something like that. We actually go way further than that and remove them from the trained models, the machine learning models, on the next spin of that. So these are things, again, that we wanted to make sure we were investing in right from the beginning to get right from the beginning. It's not the sort of thing that you can go back really and add later. You can't, you don't get to build trust after something happens. You've got to build that into the system right from the very beginning. And the same as I'm showing on the screen here with People Insights in WebEx. Like I mentioned, having that ability to edit, remove, hide the data, you've got to put it into the control. Put the controls into the hands of the people that are going to use this, so that it's not a forced feature in any way. Does that answer your question, or are there other areas that you'd like to focus on?
Yeah, no, I think that was really good to cover. I think the answer to this one is going to be similar in that it's a varied approach. But how do customers go about enabling some of these new features?
Yeah, and it's pretty straightforward, but it also varies depending on the system. So for Webex Assistant, just to give an example, it's go to Control Hub and check a box effectively to opt Webex Assistant in. It will then go and calculate all of those measurements that I mentioned, like the interaction distance, organizational distance. It's not, of course, retaining or really using the raw data that is effectively processed and deleted. Instead, what it's doing is calculating scores when the user, when the administrator opts in. And then, similarly, I think I covered FaceRec earlier. That's still in trial, so that won't be available for people to actually go enable yet, but it will be a similar type of flow through Control Hub. And the same for People Insights. That's in trial, so if people have that system today and are not on the trial, they can't yet go enable it, but it will take that similar type of opt-in type of approach to enable it. But we try to keep this very simple with just a single opt-in from an organization point of view, and then after that, individual control settings that people can interact with in terms of how they want their data to be used in the system.
Okay, great. So now to get to kind of an exciting part of it. If you want to go forward one slide, I saw we had that imagine the possibilities, right? So we've introduced these great features now into the WebEx platform, but really this stuff is just going to keep getting better over time as it evolves. So what are some of the future scenarios that you think may come about from leveraging AI and machine learning capabilities in the collaboration space?
Yeah, it's almost limitless, right? So it's up to our imaginations, but also combined also what people are ready for, and frankly, what makes a difference. You could invent all sorts of interesting stuff, but what will people really use, and how will they interact with this to make the collaboration experience better? That's where we're really trying to bring that lens to focus on. But if you think about intelligent collaboration and some of the experience that I outlined here, they're really just a starting point. There's so much more, we could do, especially when you bring a lot of those different data points together. Imagine, something like a proactive join with face recognition and with other, with a combination of those features. And I don't want to call those out as, roadmap items or things we would do or to speculate on them, but hopefully, everyone can see the direction we could take this in by either combining those data points, or adding more intelligence to the collaboration space overall. Also, in the meeting room environment, we're seeing this just explosion in huddle spaces and huddle rooms as people use devices like the new RoomKit Mini to light up, sort of soft furnished areas or breakout areas as collaboration spaces and use them in that way. And all of these AI features, machine learning features in the cognitive umbrella are available, in that same space and on that same platform, just as they are in the bigger conference room environment. But imagine how we could make that even better. Imagine how we could integrate with sensors in the meeting space and other devices, within those spaces. When I can ask it to make a coffee at the water cooler breakout room and it shows up with a coffee, I'm going to be pretty impressed. And if any of you out there are attending Cisco Live, we at Barcelona had a very interesting demo on that, which you may be able to see in San Diego. I'll need to check this out, but it basically brews. It uses face recognition to brew the strength of coffee depending on how fatigued you look at that point in time. So that's not something we're looking to maybe introduce in the collaboration space, but it's a very interesting use of the technology. And I was upset because my coffee ended up being brewed very strong each day. I clearly wasn't rested enough. But it does show how the technology can be used. I mean, that's just a little bit of imagination. But when you integrate with the sensors and the sort of IoT space around the collaboration space, some very interesting things can happen. And then finally, one we didn't talk about, as a main topic here, but to me, it's actually an area that is, has just huge opportunity for AI and machine learning because it tends to be such a data-driven space, and it's a space that I spent 15 years of my career in. I didn't mention that earlier when we talked about background, but contact center and customer care, customer journey is an area that we're trying to reimagine around this customer journey intelligence hub. Where we can integrate all sorts of machine learning experiences. Now, that statement alone tells us something. Just because we can integrate all sorts of experiences doesn't mean that we should. So we're experimenting with what makes sense. Can you do machine learning based routing? Absolutely you can. Should you? Well, it depends on the outcome. Is it going to make it better than it is today? If it is, then yeah, we should look at that. And if not, then you focus in different types of areas. We've got a very interesting solution called Cisco Answers, which is partnered with Google's Contact Center AI, and it does technology such as topic extraction and topic modeling. So you can ingest and effectively feed it your data like frequently asked questions, data sheets, whatever it is that describe what the agent in a contact center environment works on. And then on a live call or text channel, email channel, that software agent, that AI component, can interpret what the user or caller is asking about and assist the agent in responding or towards documentation or useful follow-up with a view to resolving the call or issue as quickly as possible. And the second thing, or last thing actually I will say about that is that somewhat describes the design philosophy we've had with AI, which is the assisted experience. We're not necessarily, trying to get into a replacement or automated type of approach with these technologies. They can do it in certain ways. back on our noise detection example, we could auto-mute the user, but then you're making decisions on behalf of users. And I don't like that in AI at this point, despite loving the technology. People should be in control. So having that assisted experience in the customer care space, while full automation may be possible, it may not be necessary. It's really about the assisted experiences in general for us right now.
Yeah, and that's awesome. And so now we've kind of covered everything. I want to ask you though more about the platform approach to this. Like, what does that enable Cisco to do? Since we do have such a strong platform with these different technologies and merging them together, it seems like a definite use case for AI to start cross product integrations and use cases.
It is. I think that there's from a platform point of view, there's multiple ways we can view this. We've been, like I said earlier, trying to look at this more as a tactical application of technologies across our portfolio. There is a platform aspect to this, and of course, the fact that we can invest in AI and machine learning in every aspect of our portfolio, whether it's contact center, meetings, calling, that's an important piece. But I would stop short of the sort of overall collaboration brain, like I mentioned earlier. And I do think the industry will get there, and we'll get there as well. But there are definitely those advantages, and you can see it in the people insights in particular, that you can get, you can see how combinations of different features would be very useful. Like we've got the meeting platform, and you've got the people insight to the attendees in the meeting. You've also got noise detection going on in the meeting as well. So that while they're individual features, it's the combination of them that makes this pretty powerful from a platform point of view. And there's much more we can do and intend to do in that space to build on the existing strong platforms that we've got.
Okay, awesome. Well, Keith, this has been a great discussion. There are a few questions in the chat that we didn't get to answer, so I will go back and maybe we'll create a blog post out of that or something, so we can answer them there, or we'll reach out directly. But everybody, follow Keith on Twitter as well. We might be answering some of them there at TechKeith. You can follow me at Derek in the Cloud. And we'll be sure to post a link to that blog if we do get it posted. And
Derek, if you don't mind, there was one that just caught my eye where somebody asked about Webex Assistant and when does it go GA. That was announced last week at Enterprise Connect, so it is out there. If you've got cloud-connected Cisco Room System video devices, you can go enable that if you want to check it out.
Perfect. All right, Joe, I'll turn it back to you.
Hey, thanks, everybody. Basically, what I just wanted to say, one final note is pretty much on behalf of Derek and Keith and really the entire Cisco team, I want to thank you for your attendance and your participation today. Please watch your inbox in the coming days for a complete recap email, including a link to the recording, the presentation slides, and some of the other content and assets that they kind of talked about through this stuff. There's some infographics and some ebooks that I think you might like too that'll complement this thing pretty well. So thanks again. I want to say have a great day, and I really want to say thanks again to Derek and Keith for taking time out of their day to put this presentation on. Thanks a lot, guys.